I selected the guerrilla filmmaking module because I wanted to challenge myself. I wanted to be challenged to independently create a film out of what has been sitting in front of me for years. The internet, my phone, my laptop, whatever I could find. I wanted to experience both the freedom and restrictions of the traditional form of movie making, and test what I could do with no budget, little help, and tight deadlines. For both the first and second films I made, my local concern and my political events pieces, I had some difficulty in finding and editing source material. Importing the videos I found into an editable format was no difficulty at all. I simply used YouTube and an online video downloader and converter. It was finding the videos that was the problem. As a result, in the latter part of my film, a lot of the news footage is from the same news station, Wesh 2 News, but unfortunately it feels a little one-sided. I tried to find other news stations that were covering the court case and covering it in a way that suited my film, but unfortunately I was unsuccessful. Another problem I faced in my political events film was that of time restrictions and narrative. The handbook for the module gives a loose time limit of 1 to 3 minutes in length. My first edit of the film was around 13 minutes in length. I decided to completely shave down the narrative and focus on the orca attacks and OSHA case about willful negligence, cutting out background information on orcas. However, after receiving feedback, I realised to completely cut out information on orcas devalued the film in several ways, and so I edited back in some footage containing a comparison between captive and wild orca attacks and information on the intelligence of the species. The problems I encountered in my other 2 films, that of multiculturalism and human rights, were very different in nature, as I was not relying on source footage, but rather footage I would schedule and shoot. For my multicultural film, I had to deal with time restraints. I only had half an hour to film the footage I wanted. 2 more problems arose post-filming. I was unable to view the footage for a week as the memory slot on my laptop broke, and I left my CD card reader in my apartment. So it was only when I began editing that I realised my initial idea of attempting to seamlessly blend the bookshelves into one another to create one take of various travel books did not technically work. I then had to work with the footage that I had. For my human rights film, the problem was finding an idea, which I eventually did with a helping hand. Finding an actor proved easy enough. I posted on several Facebook groups and emailed a company recommended by a fellow student that had been set up by a fellow student. Fortunately, I was applied to on Facebook quickly enough. I filmed my Nokia Lumia 620. Before filming, I realised I would have a problem with sound. As I wanted to film CCTV style, I had to only use phones to film with, as per the challenge. The audio recorded on my Lumia would be too poor quality and too quiet to hear the dialogue. I tackled this problem by using my friend's broken iPhone, using the app Voice Record. I instructed my actor to, whenever he answers the phone, start recording. This resulted in a high quality audio file. I then tackled the issue of cutting from a low quality sound from my Nokia Lumia to the high quality sound from my iPhone. I used this to my advantage, writing into the plot that the camera tracks the protagonist's phone number, hacks into the signal and records the conversation. Upon completion of my local concern film, I showed it to my documentary class for feedback. That was given, appreciated, and taken under consideration in my re-edit, along with other feedback I had received from various sources. I also posted this film on Facebook, Twitter, and Tumblr, using hashtags to widen my audience. On Tumblr, I received a fair bit of feedback and likes, as well as several reblogs from sites dedicated to that concern. My other films I did not promote quite as much, mostly due, unfortunately, to my lack of free time. However, each film I made, I screened to my housemates and shared upon my own Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, and onto YouTube. I would possibly like to share my human rights film a bit more, as it is the one I feel most confident and proud of. I intend to add each film onto my online portfolio on Behance. I was watching the 82nd Academy Awards broadcast, and I was sitting about 2 metres from the television screen as the rest of my family was asleep. Matt Damon came on stage to present the award for Best Documentary Feature. I had never heard of Taiji or Rico Barry before this. The documentary won, and I made sure to see the whole film. Louis Psihoyos' 2009 documentary The Cove. I had been to SeaWorld many times. I've seen the dolphin shows, stroked and fed the dolphins, even swam with the dolphins. But I didn't know the history of dolphin captivity and the present reality of it. I chose this topic as my local concern film as, although it is as physically far from local as can be, it is incredibly local to myself and my heart. In the final version of my film, it opens with home archive footage of my family on our annual Florida trip. I used footage from across the decade to show me and my family growing older each year, to convey just how personal this holiday is to all of us and how close I used to be to SeaWorld. As the driving force behind this concern, and as the man who opened my eyes to it, I wanted Rico Barry to act as the protagonist, but I didn't want too much visual interview footage, as using it without sync sound proved too jarring. I watched interviews over Barry on YouTube to find a narrative voiceover. I wanted audio separate from the Cove, as I knew there would be a predominance of footage taken from the film in the second half of my film, and I didn't want my film to be a re-edit of the Cove. I found experimenting and working with the absence of sync sound very gratifying to work with. I believe it works best in the final part of my film. In the opening, the audio and the visuals complement each other and work in a conventional sense, and then I flip it, contrasting sounds against image and cross-cutting, emphasizing and connecting the slaughter and the SeaWorld dolphin show. This is the section of the film I am most proud of, and I believe the conventional relationship between image and sound for the first half heightens and intensifies in the switch I make at the end. I am proud of this film, and although it could be neatened up technically and perhaps have a tighter narrative, but nonetheless I am pleased with my end result. Political events. This is another film spawning from SeaWorld, and one quite different in focus and content. This is the film I spent most of my time on, probably because of the amount of footage I watched and edited, as well as my struggle with narrative focus. It opens quite lightheartedly, similarly to my local concern film, tourists enjoying the sight of these orcas and being entertained by their performances in captivity. I used the footage from the official Shamu show, released by SeaWorld, in particular the show's voiceover, to show how SeaWorld portray the relationship their trainers have with their orcas. The voiceover from the show romanticizes the unique relationship between the trainer and the orca. I felt this was a very important inclusion in my film, as the court case I follow is whether or not SeaWorld intentionally put their trainers in danger. I wanted this internet search section of my film to show how easy it was for me to find information on captive orcas and their attacks. I compared a short list of wild orca attacks and a long list of documented captive orca attacks. I also included Don Brancho's autopsy, as it furthers the theme of what the corporation SeaWorld presents themselves as, and the harsh reality. I then edited footage of incidents and attacks over the top of a neurologist, Dr. Lori Marino. He was also interviewed in the documentary Blackfish, explaining the intelligence of orcas. I wanted to draw the connection between their intelligence and these attacks. Orcas are incredibly large, powerful creatures who are easily capable of killing humans, but a lot of attacks are just that, attacks, incidents and injuries. I, and with many others, believe these orcas are acting out, and are not randomly attacking in violence. I wanted this subtext to be present, as it is not only the focus of my film, but it is an important layer in it. I am also proud of this film. I believe it could be tighter, condensed, maybe a bit more technically perfect, but I put a lot of hours into this piece and worked hard on it. Multiculturalism. Multiculture, to me, is the airport. I grew up and still live in the countryside of Northern Ireland, and it's not a very multicultural place. Combined with the fact that I was quite sheltered growing up, culture, to me, came in the form of travelling. Although I was sheltered, I was, and still am, very privileged to the fact that I am able to travel, and that I have travelled quite frequently. But there are always many more countries and cities in the departure board I see every time that I have no idea about, that I've read and fantasized about, and travel books full of places and cultures I don't even know exist. And so I always think of travelling when I think of multiculturalism, and how easy it is in the modern age, how accessible every corner of the globe is to the other corner. This is why I decided to film in the airport, because multiculturalism, to me, is the accessibility of cultures in the modern age. I wanted to include travel books in my film, as the freedom and ease of reading about other cultures would have been possible years and years ago, but today's only costs £8.99. And the footage of the airport, particularly the departure board, which again years ago to visit another culture in a matter of hours would have been near possible, but today it is commonplace. My initial plan was to film the travel books in the shop and edit with each take to make one long seamless bookshelf before travelling to the departure board, as it all had to be in one take. However, in editing this didn't work. It didn't look right and technically failed, so I experimented with the idea of the one take. I ended up going to my original plan to feed each bookshelf into the next, and I layered the footage on top of that, of the departure board, so that the technical flaws are more forgivable. From the bookshelf I travelled to a departure board and began to overlap images of my room, a large map on the wall, surrounded by postcards of all the cultures and places I have visited. Here I wanted to emphasise just how much culture the world has, and I slowly zoom into the world map, zooming in on all these individual countries and cultures before they start to fade out to departures. All of these locations are accessible from this one place, and then, using some feedback I received, I inserted subtitles of some of the thoughts that regularly cross my mind when I am in the departure lounge. I am again proud of this film. It is not the film I saw myself making when I started planning the filming of it, but like Jorgen Leth in 2003's The 5 Obstructions, I enjoyed playing with the restrictions given to me, bending the rules slightly to put across my vision of the film. Human rights. The issue of privacy and controversy over CCTV is something I find equally fascinating and disturbing, especially with the recent NSA leaks in America. I wanted to explore this idea of non-privacy, the idea that everything that happens to us is documented, and the idea of omnipresent technology. I decided to pick an incredibly vulnerable and private moment, the breakup of a relationship, and document it in a very simplistic CCTV style. I didn't want to do anything outrageous, such as finding terrorist data, or government secrets being recorded, or something sensationalist. I wanted to look at how the normal, everyday person is caught on camera pretty much everywhere they go. Whilst editing, I did start to become a bit too sensationalist for my own liking. Nothing too extreme, but I ended up including a bit of the camera focusing in on the protagonist's face and finding out his identity, scanning his shopping bags, etc. I ended up cutting this out and just including the phone tracking scene, as I felt like I was starting to make a big deal when I wanted something simple, something almost dull and mundane. This is the film I'm most proud of. I feel it is the most technically achieved, despite, possibly because of, being filmed on a mobile phone, as well as the most narratively concise. It's rare that I honestly like something I've made, but I am proud of this one. Throughout the classes William has taught me on this module, I have learnt more than I thought I would have, and things I didn't think I would have learned at all. Unfortunately, none of the readings or films have directly inspired my own guerrilla films that I created for this module. However, that is not to say they have not inspired me. The audacity of Jafar Panahi and Mirtahmasb's This Is Not a Film, as well as Weiwei's Disturbing the Peace, inspired and made me realise that anything can be filmed. You can make a story from the confines of your own apartment. And they also reminded me of Randy Moore's Escape from Tomorrow, the idea of asking forgiveness instead of permission, of just going out there and filming. In a strange way, the constraints presented to me in each challenge gave me an odd freedom. I would have never considered filming a short fiction film on my mobile phone before. I would have thought, I have a very nice, very beautiful Canon DSLR. Why should I film my substandard Nokia Lumia that wasn't even created for filmmaking? Now I think, why shouldn't I? One isn't better than the other. To quote Mike Figgis in digital filmmaking, the more time you spend with cameras, the better it is for you. Every camera has a certain look and a certain feel. In the same article, Figgis talks about a snobbery about pieces of equipment. I had that snobbery before starting this module. I got my Canon because I wanted its beautiful high quality images. I've seen short films shot on Canon DSLRs. I wanted to emulate those images. But I had a Sony camcorder along with my phone, my iPad, my laptop webcam. I just craved a bigger, more expensive camera to give me the ability to film something cinematic, but I was wrong. It's still a very beautiful and cinematic camera, but a beautiful high quality staged image can be gorgeously cinematic, but a grainy image that's full of emotion and character and actually tells a story can be tenfold. This module has enabled me to see cinema in a different light, a lower light, a grainier light, a low budget light. I don't need expensive equipment to make a film, I just need an idea. And maybe some restrictions.